Secretary of State Marco Rubio testified on Capitol Hill today, defending U.S. actions in Venezuela, as well as other recent foreign policy decisions. In his first appearance before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee since the operation that captured Nicolás Maduro, Rubio insisted the U.S. is not currently at war with Venezuela, but is not ruling out that President Trump may order further U.S. military actions there. Senators pressing Secretary Rubio on the possibility of U.S.-led or supported regime changes in countries like Iran and Cuba.
What happens if the supreme leader is removed in Iran? What happens next?
Well, that's an open question. I mean, no one knows who would take over. Obviously, their system is divided between the supreme leader and the IRGC that responds directly to him. And then you've got these, quasi-elected individuals, the ones that wear the suits on television who are part of their political branches, but ultimately have to run everything they do by the supreme leader. So I don't think anyone can give you a simple answer as to what happens next in Iran if the supreme leader and the regime were to fall.
Will you make a public commitment today to rule out U.S. regime change in Cuba?
Regime change?
Yes.
Oh, no, I think we would love to see the regime there change. We would like to. That doesn't mean that we're going to make it change, but we would love to see it change. There's no doubt about the fact that it would be of great benefit to the United States.
Well, NewsNation's Joe Khalil is live on Capitol Hill, where that hearing just wrapped up, Joe. So what are the big takeaways?
Yeah, it was about a 2.5-hour hearing. Secretary Rubio getting pressed on, as you've just heard there, a whole range of foreign policy issues. I think up forefront was really Venezuela. This is the first time, remember, that anyone at this high level from the administration is doing a public testimony, answering questions from lawmakers. Obviously, they've done so in private settings, but there were clearly a lot of concerns from senators about things like how long the sort of military engagement with Venezuela may go on. Is it going to escalate? Could there be American boots on the ground in Venezuela? There were also concerns about costs, about what happens with oil, what the governing structure of Venezuela looks like, and how long it may take for, as the administration's goals laid out, Venezuela to have a democratic, functioning government that can be an ally of the United States. Rubio was very defensive of the actions that the administration has already taken. In fact, he said, look, we had a government there that basically gave free range for all of America's adversaries to be operating, whether it was Iran or Russia or what have you. They had a home in Venezuela until the administration took action there. But on the question of whether there could be further military conflict with Venezuela, something that Secretary Rubio today did not rule out, take a listen to this exchange here that he had with Democratic Senator Tammy Duckworth, a combat veteran herself, about what comes next.
The president already said that he was ready to put American troops in Venezuela again. So we're at war right now. So if things don't go well with the Chavistas you've empowered,
when did the president say he was going to put troops in Venezuela?
A military option, what is your criteria for returning to a military option and putting boots on?
Well, I don't recall the president saying he was going to put troops in Venezuela. Where did he say that?
I'm asking you, what are your...
But that's what you said. I didn't remember the president
has already said that he was ready to put American troops in Venezuela.
No, I think the president has said that he retains the right as commander-in-chief to protect the United States against any imminent threats. Maybe that involves troops, maybe that involves air power. We hope, but we don't anticipate that being the case in Venezuela.
I worry that you are playing fast and loose with our nation's
Well, I just gave you testimony here.
I just want to conclude by...
Yeah, but I just gave you testimony of how well things are moving forward, not as fast as everybody would like.
Yeah, but you also said that in 6 or 9 months, if things don't go well, you're going to have to do something else. And the president's already said that he's not ruled out the military option. And you've also just said that, yes, we are at war. The president has wartime powers.
But every president retains the power to use military to protect...
So it's reasonable for me to ask you...
And I gave you a very specific example. Every president retains the right to defend the United States against an imminent threat.
So some pretty tough questioning there for the secretary, and he handled that, as you saw. There were also some concerns among both sides of the aisle, really, as to whether Congress is actually going to be involved in its constitutional duties when it comes to approving acts of war moving forward, if there are some. And the other big topic, Nichole, was NATO. And obviously, we just had this episode with Greenland. There were concerns about whether the president's rhetoric and how everything played out with Greenland has undermined the strength of the NATO alliance. Secretary Rubio pushed back on that and said that it is as strong now as it ever was. He says the administration does value the NATO partnership, but that the NATO allies of the United States do need to carry their weight more, invest more in their own defense, because he says that is collectively something that benefits everyone. You had a lot of Democratic senators saying they are doing that, but that the president's rhetoric really did sort of unnecessarily undermine the partnership that the U.S. has had with our allies. So a lot of back and forth there. 2.5 hours of testimony. Secretary Rubio just leaving a couple of minutes ago.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.